Welcome to the Layer 7 API Gateway version 10. In this video, we're going to talk about how to create an HTTP2 connection using the gateway. First off, we're going to configure the gateway to accept incoming HTTP2 requests. To do this, we're going to click on Tasks, go to Transports, and Manage Listen Ports. Since HTTP2 will require a new port, we're going to click Create. We're going to give it a name, HTTP2. We're going to, in this case, do the secure version. And I want to do this over port 8001. If we want to change some of the SSL cipher supported, we can do that. Note if we click OK, we will get a warning about some of the ciphers that we have enabled. In this case, I'm just going to click Yes to go ahead and accept those. The next thing we need to do is create a policy that will listen for incoming requests. I'm going to right click on my gateway localhost node. I'm going to publish a new web API. In this case, I'm going to call this hello. The target will leave blank, but the endpoint on the gateway that will accept requests will be called hello. At this point, we have an empty policy, so I'm going to now add a policy assertion called return template response to requester. This will allow me just to send back a pre-canned response. So I'm going to change the content type here to text/plain. And I'm just going to simply type hello. I'm going to go ahead and click OK and then save and activate to make the policy available. The next thing I'll do is actually send in a request to the gateway. For this, I'm going to use a simple curl command. So if I go ahead and run this, you will notice here we're getting the request over HTTP2. And you'll see we're getting back our hello response from this connection. All right, next we're going to configure the gateway to act as a client to call an existing HTTP2 based service. To do this, we're going to create a new policy. I'm going to publish a web API. In this case, I'm going to call this request info because we're going to be using a backend service from Golang called recinfo as our HTTP2 test endpoint. The gateway endpoint will be recinfo, which will match essentially what is hosted on the Golang site. Once I've done this, I'm going to include the route via HTTP2 assertion. Here I'm going to provide my endpoint to the golang.org site. So http2.golang.org/recinfo. I'm going to leave everything else here default. You'll note here there is an HTTP2 client configuration. If you don't have clients configured, it will by default use the default config. You can also change settings with the request, response, and security header processing. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now you'll notice if I click this site directly within my web browser, you'll see it's echoing back some information about the request. It says it's a GET over HTTP2, shows some of the headers. I'm now going to make the same request, but I'm actually going to send it through the gateway instead. In this case, you'll see back essentially the same kind of information, except for this time you'll note that it is actually routing through the gateway through our localhost 8001, and we're successfully calling out to this backend endpoint. As I mentioned earlier, if you go with only the defaults, that will work. If you do, however, need to have different client configurations for the gateway to match different endpoints, you can set up multiple client configurations. To do this, you'll go to Tasks, Extensions and Add-ons, and then Manage HTTP2 Client Configurations. Once you do that, you can click Add. You can give the configuration a name. Here you can change any of the timeouts, or request size, or host connection settings. And you can also go and change things such as cipher suites, trusted certificates, and whether or not to follow redirects. And lastly, you can configure if you need the request to go through a proxy server. Once you set that up, you'll then be able to see here we have config 1 created. And if I were to go back to my route assertion from the previous request, you'll note here now that I would be able to select config 1 as the client configuration to use for this request. Thank you for listening and have a great day.